Hello, and welcome to Legacy Curious. I'm your host, David Gravelle. Today, I'll be interviewing Darren White, Oklahoma business owner, retired teacher, and wrestling coach. Darren is the founder and CEO of Agents First Insurance IMO. So let's say hello to Darren and learn more about his legacy. Hello, Darren, and welcome to Legacy Curious. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, David?
I'm doing great. Hey, I'm excited to talk to you. Of course, you're the leader and founder here at Agents First. And I want to spend this our time together just getting to know you, finding out your life story, the legacy that you've built here and want to leave behind. And, generally just start by asking, tell us about your early childhood. What brought you and your family to Oklahoma? Are you Oklahoman forever, or is this a state you chose to live?
Yeah, very nice. So I grew up I was born in Texas. Lived in San Antonio, Texas for 7 years, early years. And we family decided to move to Oklahoma. And I used to laugh about this story, but it was during that time my dad wanted to be closer to his family, his mom and dad. And he had a chance to transfer jobs, and he had the choice of Tulsa, Lawton, or Muskogee. And that was about the time the Merle Haggard song "Okie from Muskogee" was out. And he said, "Man, if there's a place like that on this world, that's where we want to go, right?" So we wound up moving to Muskogee, Oklahoma. And I was raised in Fort Gibson, a suburb of Muskogee, and raised there, graduated school there. And so I've kind of been stuck in Oklahoma most of my life after that. From about 7 years old on. I moved out for about 3 years, moved to Texas during the coaching stint while I was coaching Longview, Texas for 3 years, and we came back home to Oklahoma and been here ever since.
Yeah. Now, tell me about your family life when you were young. What was it like growing up in Oklahoma? What were the things you
Yeah,
did?
nice, right? So it was fun. Had family and friends there, and in Fort Gibson, and made a lot of good friends. Still lifelong friends. Like you grow up with guys and hang out with them. And about three of us guys on the neighborhood block that we kind of grew up together. We still get together once a year. We go ski, shoot skeet, and go golfing and hang out and just have fun. Go camping or something. We still get together, so it's kind of neat that we still keep those guys together. I had two sisters and myself, and so it was a good tight family and in Fort Gibson. My dad was the mayor of Fort Gibson, so a small town Oklahoma, and you can't get away with much when your dad's the mayor of the city.
Right.
So anyway, but it was fun.
Did you play a lot of sports? Were you a wrestler, footballer? What
Um,
were the sports you did?
yeah, for sure. So I did a little bit of everything. Did a little bit of everything, but I wrestled throughout from the time I was about fifth grade up. I was in wrestling, got involved with it, and loved it. That wound up being my sport of choice. I enjoyed it, and it carried on. After high school, I wound up. Well, I went and got a job right after high school. Then I wound up going back to college and got my college and education. Decided to be a teacher, and with that following my dreams, my heart, right, and becoming a wrestling coach, and that's what I always wanted to do, or at least I felt like I did. And anyway, I was a wrestling coach, school teacher, coach, and principal, administrator for 23 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and as a coach, who did you model yourself after? Who were the heroes in your life that you thought were people that were you wanted to
Yeah.
emulate or be role models of?
So, a couple people in my life that really were role models in my life. Wrestling coach was one of them. Obviously, I don't really felt like his name was Coach Hinkle, and he wasn't probably the greatest wrestling coach out there. He was just an overall good coach, but a good person, right? And I think when you want to emulate somebody, those are the things that you look for. I didn't get any of my wrestling styles or anything coaching techniques really from him. It was really later on in life. I'll tell you more about that in a little bit, but Coach Hinkle and then my dad was very influential in my life. He was a pastor of a church for 43 years. I grew up a preacher's kid, and Anyway, I got to realize just what, how to treat people and how to run a business. I learned all my business sense from my dad. Do things right, treat people the way you want to be treated, and it works the same. I'm running a big company today, and I understand the value of we're in the people business, and if you don't take care of your people and treat them right, you're just wasting your time. And so I learned a lot from him. My other mentor that I had in this was my very first coaching job I took on after I graduated college was in Chickasha, and a good friend of mine named Chad Randall. And Chad was recently he just won another state championship with his team in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and been doing this for a bit. He was nominated Coach of the Year. He'll be in the Hall of Fame one of these days for coaching, and he's done a phenomenal job. And he was a great mentor. And really, most of my wrestling sense I've got was from Chad, learning, spent 5 years under his tutelage and got to really understand from probably the best technician in the state. In my opinion, he is. And so it was a good experience. So those are the three people I probably would say were the most influential as far as leading me to where I am today.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
looked at one other person that maybe was influential in another part of my life, was life insurance, right? And a good friend of mine named Albert Lau was my mentor in that. And once again, we got to start somewhere, and he was the one that kind of guided me and taught me along the way in this realm of what we're doing.
All right. And could you speak to some of the highlights you had as a coach, like some of the memories that you want to share about some of the wrestlers you coached, or some of the ways that you affected the
Yeah.
community?
Very cool. No, wrestling was a big part of my life for a long time, right? And it always will be. But through that, I think just meeting and developing kids and making friendships along the way. Like these guys will still call me and text me on pretty often, right? So my very first head coaching job I took it in Mangum, Oklahoma. And I'd been an assistant in Chickasha for 5 years, went to Mangum. In my very first year um, there, I was able to coach my first state champion, right? A guy named Trevor Robinson. And Trevor, super good kid. And anyway, had placed years before, but it was his first time to actually win it. And it was pretty cool. Your very first year to coach a state champion. And then those aren't easy to come by. And my last year as a head wrestling coach, I don't know what, 20, 12, 15 years later as a head coach, I coached my last state champion. So I had a bookends, right? So the year I retired from
Yeah.
coaching, I had a state champion the first year. So it was kind of cool. And then I had a lot of state placers and qualifiers all in between. But it was fun. I enjoyed that. So that was kind of my experience of getting to coach. I love it. Got to, like I said, develop the minds of a lot of young youth and really mentor them along the way. And it was a big part of my life for sure.
Okay. Well, let's segue and talk a bit about what brought you to insurance. What was
Yeah.
that transition like from teaching principal, leader to want to get involved in offering insurance as a solution for families and people?
No doubt. Let me move this out of the way. Let's see. Insurance, man. I was a wrestling coach and a school teacher for a long time. I got my administration degree in education administration at Southwestern Oklahoma State University in Weatherford. Uh, anyway, so I got my degree from there, and I knew I wanted to use it, but I just wasn't sure when, right? But I just felt like it was time. I wasn't getting any younger. I needed to use that master's degree, so I went in and applied for a um, they accepted me and took me on, and I was the principal for about 5 years. Um, and I was still coaching in on the side and there, running some youth clubs and stuff. You don't want to ever get out of that, and so I was still doing that. But my focus was on being a principal, and I'll be honest, David, I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like the bureaucracy of being a principal, all that stuff that it just wasn't fun. in my opinion. I didn't enjoy it.
Too far away
Things were
from the
different.
kids, right?
Parents are
That sounds like you're
it
yeah, paperwork than people work.
it really was, and having to please everybody, and all the negativity that comes with being a principal, and then seeing some parents just a little bit crazy these days, man. And I'm telling you, we had to deal with some crazy stuff, and I just like, man, this is not fun anymore. I really want to get back into what I enjoy doing. That was coaching. So I knew I wanted to do that, but I just wasn't sure what or how. And this is with how life insurance happened. My wife and I was at church one Sunday morning, and we had a group come by our church. It was called Teen Challenge, and they really inspired me. Just a bunch of kids that really struggled in life, and they found their purpose, their hope within this community, and it really hit home because I've coached so many wrestlers over the year that I knew there was a bunch of those that really could have benefited from something like this as well. And I told my wife, I said, "Baby, write them a check for $100." And she kind of leans over to me and says, "Babe, we don't get paid till Friday." And I was like, I kind of sat back a little bit. I didn't realize just how tight things were, but we were even I was the principal at the time, and we were still living paycheck to paycheck. And it's a shame. But that's just reality. And it kind of went all over me. I really started thinking, man, at this age of my life, I should be able to give to the ministry whenever I want to give. Or if I want to give to a cause, I should be able to, right?
Right.
And I really went home that night and I just prayed, said, God, man, something's got to give. This is not going to work, and not to mention, I want to get out of administration. I mean, I was going to lose about $25,000 if I got back into coaching. And so I needed something really had to change in our lives. And the next day on this Indeed app on my phone, it says make $40,000 part-time selling life insurance. And I thought, shoot, all I need is about 25,000, so I said I could do that. So I called the guy up. He's in North Carolina. And I said, what is this all about? And we talked for a while, and he said, "You could do this." I said, "Okay, I could do anything I want. And you're right, I could do this." So he sent me a study course, and he said, "Take it the month and study it." But I don't do that. If I do something, I go all in, and I
Yeah.
did it in 3 days. So I studied in 3 days. As soon as I got the study course, I signed up for my test, and 3 days later, I'm taking it, and I passed my test first go around. And I got involved with life insurance, right? So I didn't have the mentorship I have today. My guy was in North Carolina, and I had to learn everything myself. I didn't have any kind of really mentoring at all. It was just I just said he just said go get them, and I like okay, I'll figure this thing out, and I figured it out on my own. Um, Through that, I went to my very first um, place to sell, and it was a husband and wife in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and the older couple. And I go there and I'm sitting across the table from them. We're doing a mortgage protection. Very first time. Now, listen, I didn't know insurance from anything. I knew wrestling. I could show you how to hit a double leg or a high crotch like nobody else, but I didn't know life insurance like I needed to. I was brand new, my very first home, right? So I just think I'm going to figure this thing out. And I go in there, and really what I found out was it's really about getting to know the people and what their needs are. We can figure out the rest down the road. So I sit there with this husband and wife, and he looked at me and he said, "Darren, I don't even know why you're here." He said, "I can't get insurance." I said, "You can't get insurance?" He said, "No, I had a heart attack 10 years ago." I said, I bet we can get you some insurance. Let me do my job and I'll try, right? So we go through the application. I get Forsters on the line because that's who we're selling through, and I get them online and they do a telephone interview with him about his health. At the end of the interview, the lady says, "Congratulations, you qualify for insurance." And I looked over at his wife and she had some tears in her eyes. And I looked at him, he had this big old smile, and we jump up and we give each other a high five,
Yeah.
and that was my very first experience of selling life insurance. I remember leaving that day and I went around the corner so they didn't see, and I parked on the side of the road. I get my phone out and I'm doing the math on the calculator, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow. So I call my wife up. I said, "Baby, guess what?" I said, "I just made my first sale." I said, "And that was one of the funnest things I've ever done." And she said, "Well, that's really cool." And I said, "But get this, I just made as much money on this one sale as I make in a week in teaching school." And she's like, "That's crazy, right?" So I knew that there was something out there for me, so
Yeah.
to do, and that was exciting because I knew I didn't want to, and that I did have another offer. So we always wanted to go the next step ahead, and I began to realize there is more than just a world of education and coaching. You can only make so much money in that industry, right? And so when you work for somebody else, you're locked into what they want to pay you. What they told me was the state of Oklahoma said, Darren, you're worth $4,000 a month. That's what you're worth. You like it, take it or leave it. That's what you're
Yeah.
worth as a wrestling coach and a school teacher. And that's why I brought home about $4,000 a month. I knew my worth was so much more than that. But how do you really get that out? How do you do that? Well, the only way to do it is become an independent agent or work for yourself, and then you can determine how much you make. And that's what got me into life insurance right there.
Okay. So, I've heard this story and I love it. I think it's one of my favorite ones that you tell about your aha moment when you went from, being a successful agent. Maybe you could tell our audience about that trip you took with your wife after you
Yeah.
qualified as, as the top sales
Yeah.
person, and then, what was the brain burst that you had to start Agents First?
Yeah, so really cool. We were my wife and I was awarded a trip, a cruise to the Caribbean, and never won anything in our lifetime. Not that we won it, we earned it. I was in the month of July, August, and the first 2 weeks of September, so a 10-week period. I wrote $100,000 of premiums, which at my comp rate, that was $100,000 commission I made in 10 weeks. So in the course of 10 weeks, did $100,000. And, I could never have done anything like that in education, right? So whenever I finally got out of education, I said, I'm going to go full time in insurance. It just blew my mind how much money you could really make in this industry. I never had a clue. I was always working for that payday, and living paycheck to paycheck. And finally, first time in my life, we were really doing very, very well, better than we've ever done. And I had hope for the future. So we are in the top 1% of the company, and we won a trip to the Caribbean on a cruise. We flew from Oklahoma to Miami, boarded at Miami, and went to the Bahamas. While we were on the cruise, I looked at my wife and I said, Baby, when we get off the cruise, we're going to start our own company. And she looked at me like I'm crazy. She said, Darren, why would we do that? Like, we got everything going, making more money we ever made in our lifetime. And they were nice enough to send us on this free cruise, right? And I'm like, yeah,
Right.
that's great. I agree with everything you said. But look around. We have all these agents, and we're the only ones on this cruise. And I said, when you really look at the numbers, about 92% of all life insurance agents don't make it. They brag about the 8%ers, the 8% that are successful and that really do well. You always hear the 8% club. But nobody talks about those 92%ers. And I told my wife, I said, we've got to do something to make sure everybody has the opportunity to succeed. And she said, oh, I get it. What would you name the company? I said, we're going to call it Agents First. And she laughed at me. She was the first one. I knew this was going to happen. She said, now, Darren, she said, agents first doesn't make sense. I don't like it. And I said, why not? She said, because you're putting the agents ahead of your clients. I said, no, we're not. I said, I want you to think of it like this. And this is that aha moment right here. I said, this is really what we built this company around, this concept. When you're on that airplane and they lose cabin pressure, the oxygen mask falls. And what do they tell you to do? Take care of yourself first so that you're able to help people around you.
Yeah.
And that is the same concept that we're using here at Agents First. Is you got to take care of your agents first so that we can save the world and go out there and help our clients. But when you have 92% failure rate in an industry, They're the problem. They're the problem.
Sure.
So we've got to create agents first. And so whenever we get back, I called up about three of my good friends. They were top producers, $500,000 a year producers. And I said, if I were to start my own IMO, or if you were, what would be the 4 or 5 things that we should address, right? That we want to make sure because we want to save the 92 percenters.
Yeah.
And they talked about things like leads, right? We want to make sure because I think one of the reasons people were failing was they were giving or force fed old leads that were being resold and resold and resold and causing persistency to be terrible, causing agents to just not be happy, right? Be frustrated. And not to mention who wants to call it what we will, but code calling all day long, right?
Right.
Numbers that people really don't know if they're interested in insurance or don't know why you're calling.
Right.
And we were burning out agents. So leads was a big deal. Carriers was another one. So you're going to hear things like, there's companies out there that has just their product, right? Their company and they don't want you to sell anything but their one product. Well, when you do that, you're locked into to one specific product, and sometimes it's not the best, right? Sometimes it's a lot more expensive. Many times it's double the price as if you were able to shop. So we knew that we wanted agents first wanted to broker with a lot of carriers.
Yeah.
And we did. We brokered with the best. As a matter of fact, I think our IMO probably has more carriers than any IMO out there because we went out there and brokered in a lot of places to make sure that the carriers would go. So we had leads figured out. We got exclusive leads. We started our own marketing team, and we call it A1 Leads, and we do that. We also brokered with the top lead vendors in the United States company like LeadCo and out of Tulsa, UNRL, one of the best live transfer companies in the country, and a lot of other ones that we partnered with, and we get discounts. With our UNRL leads, we get those things about 50% off from what most agents get. So we just broker deals. But I think our A1 leads is probably our forte of where we're at is that we create leads for agents. We let them become their own lead vendor. They no longer have to go out there and pay a retail price on something. They get it at the cost of whatever it costs to produce that lead. And we do that for every agent within us. So we address leads, we address that. The thing another thing that's real important was training. They said we need a lot of agents come and go because they're not assigned a mentor and they don't get the training like they need. Now, David, you've been on our trainings. If we do anything right, I think training is probably one of the one things. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And it's consistency. That's the other, piece that I'll speak to is that it's every day there's new information. There's new people disseminating that. There's professionals. There's mentors that you work one-on-one with. Myself, I lead a team, and I'm led by Scott and yourself. So, I think that that's again a big strength here at Agents First is our ability to work effectively together, to learn and train the others on that. So, you've got to, like you said, train the trainers as well as train the agents to be able to be good stewards to our clients. So,
Yeah.
again, I applaud you for that focus. It has it's done me a world of good and the people that I lead as well.
I appreciate it, David. That means a lot. And those are the things that we did here. Is we had to save those 92 percenters. So we addressed every negative issue that we could find and we addressed it. We didn't just sweep it under a rug and say, don't worry about that. Every agent that comes to me is important to me. And I think part of the culture that we develop over here at Agents First is developing agents. And if you notice in the background, my saying is Agents First Insurance, turning agents into agencies, right? And
Yeah.
that's our slogan over here. So what does that mean, turning agents into agencies? We teach our agents to become leaders and how to become a really good agent. Now, at some point, David, in your life, you might say, I can sell for the rest of my life, or I can build a team of agents and become an agency, right? And we're going to teach every agent how to do that. We're going to teach you how to mentor, how to lead, how to guide, and how to lead by example. And then by doing so, when you're ready, we're going to help you grow a team of agencies. And all these different agencies you'll see below me, they're agents that have started their own companies, and we develop them. And now they've got a company like Agents First supporting them. And so that's a good ideal or example of what we do over here. We just turn agents into agencies, and we really believe the concept we have at Agents First is second to none. And as far as Oklahoma, I'm in Seminole, Oklahoma. This is headquarters. This is it. We have agents all across the United States and almost every state right now working with us, and even an agent that works in Spain, right? That lives in Spain, and he'll get up and call, and he's on our Zoom calls every day. And so, I've always wanted to keep it here. People would ask me about, are you ever going to move out of Oklahoma? In Seminole, Oklahoma, it's a little bitty town of about 5,000 people, maybe 7,000 people, right in the middle of the state. And I said, no, this is our hometown. This is where my wife and I were married. We went to church. We met in church here. We raised our family for the most part here. If I'm going to do anything right, I'm going to keep this is going to stay home. The headquarters is going to be in Seminole, Oklahoma, and we want to keep everything back here in the state. So
Yeah, well, Darren, again, thanks for sharing all that. The last series of questions here will be around the legacy that you want to leave behind, and I think you just spoke to what you've built here. And so, what is it that you'd want to be remembered for, and that you'd hope that your legacy would be, when you're
yeah.
gone?
Yeah, so really, my wife is my wife. We've been married for 38 years now, and long time. And I had a medical setback about 3 years ago, and it startled me. And I realized if something were to happen at that point, I wouldn't have left my wife in a very good place, and I don't want to do that to her. Um, I want to make sure that whenever I pass away, that my wife is taken care of, has no bills, and can enjoy her years. And then with Agents First, I realized we can do so much more than that. The fact is that we can create generational wealth here, and not just me, but all my agents can do the same thing.
Right.
Follow my lead, follow my guidance, and I can take care of my grandkids. Listen, we've got three grandbabies now, and they rock our world, man. They are everything to me and my wife, and so Hudson, my oldest, is about 5. Hayden is 3, and we just have Holland Baker, who was just born, and Holland is about she's about 4 months old, maybe 5 months old now. But those babies mean everything to us. And I want to be able to create generational wealth that they don't have to worry and go through the hardships that we did. We can help make sure their college is paid for and all those things. So that's what we want to do over here at Agents First is take care of our family and give back. The other thing, David, I want to do is I want to give back to my church. I want to be able to give to the ministry whenever I want. Had a really neat experience, David. One time I was at Walmart, and this is right at Christmas time, and a couple, man and wife and his little son was in front of me, and they were paying for their groceries and their stuff, and all of a sudden they look at the price and they realize they don't have enough money. The lady starts saying, "Wait, let's take that back," and they're having to have the son. We're going to have to put this back. And he's like, "Okay, mom, I understand." They just didn't have the money to pay for it. And they were standing right behind him. And I just went up to the lady at the register. I gave him my credit card or my debit card. And I said, "I'm paying for it." And they looked at me, and that little boy, he's like, "Thank you, sir." And that lady hugged me. And I said everything, like stuff they'd already put back. I said, "Put it back up here. It's all, I'm paying for it all." And she was about to cry, and I just thought it really felt good. And for the first time in my life, like that wasn't even nothing to me to be able to do
Right.
that. It was a couple $100, but I was like,
Yeah.
no big deal, right? I couldn't have done that as a school teacher or a coach even a principal. I wish I could have. The reality was I couldn't. but now I can. And I've done that so many times because that felt so good. And that's what I enjoy about what I've been able to do here is now I can give whenever I get the urge to help somebody, I'm going to do it because there's nothing like giving back, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of my legacy is to be able to create something that you have the resources to just be able to give. We're building a brand new church in Semino, and our church is called Starting Point, and we we need some donors, and I would like nothing more than to build a big youth center out there, and maybe Agents First or the Darren White,
Yeah.
something to let them know that I was able to get back to it, and that's one of my goals is to be able to do that for them as well.
Okay. Well, again, thanks so much, Darren, for sharing. Of course, my community that is close enough to yours that appreciate the work you're doing here in Oklahoma. You're an inspiration to me and my team, and every day that we work together, I feel like we're advancing that legacy of yours, and
Yeah.
it's inspired me and my team to go and find other people to do the same thing, right? Help them grow and develop to a point where they can, give back in those ways that they are inspired to do. So, thanks
David,
again, and we'll leave it there today, and we'll look to see you again in the future here. And happy Easter to you, Darren.
happy Easter to you. Thank you guys for having me on. All right, thank you, David.
Well, thanks for joining us today as we got to know Darren White and the legacy he hopes to leave behind. As always, I'm your host, David Gravelle. Subscribe, like, comment, and share. And if you or someone you know would like help getting your legacy in order, reach out to us here at legacycurious@gmail.com. Until next time, stay curious.